Okay, welcome back to the Investigative Journal on this June 10th, 2016 day on our calendar. I'm your host, Greg Anthony, and you're listening to FirstAmendmentRadio.com. This is the Investigative Journal, the show called The Alternative to the Alternative News. Interesting. You can listen to this show every evening from 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's on FirstAmendmentRadio.com Pacific Time, and also at 11 a.m. Pacific Time. And if you can't catch those two shows, go to my website at arcticbeacon.com, arcticbeacon.com, and you can listen to shows and read articles going back over a decade regarding the Vatican-led New World Order. And those two words at the beginning of that phrase are the most important. A story in history left out on purpose, changed on purpose, in order to create one day their final goal, a one-world government, which you can see is working fast and strong today to come about, and a one-world religion, and that is the way it's going to be, according to the powers that be when they meet in their secret meetings and their secret agenda. All week we've been looking at how the Vatican disrupts Christian ministries in this country. Their goal is to get rid of Protestantism and to bring it under the umbrella of the one mother church, as they say, Rome. And they're doing a good job of it, because there is no criticism now in most Protestant churches regarding the Pope. They don't talk about how the Protestant reformers pinpointed them as the Antichrist institution, as well as much, much more. How their tentacles go out throughout the countries of the world through their concordats, through their agreements with countries that give them special privileges. And the Jesuit order, the henchmen of the Vatican, to make sure that it is carried out. It is carried out for one reason and one reason alone. The Pope is the king of the world, and he made that clear when he came to this country just recently last year and was given a free hand to speak to Congress as if he was the man in charge. And you better believe he is. That secret has to be kept secret. Otherwise, there are plans to move us into this one world order. Would take a long, long time, or may never even come to fruition. So I've talked about how they do this here in America, how they get rid of any vestige of Christianity, and make it clear that Catholicism is not Christianity. They like to say it is, but it isn't. I grew up in it. It is a pagan religion, using Christ, using Christianity as a cover for what they really want to do. And people that speak up against it, like the Tony Alamo ministry, who are very successful at doing this on both a spiritual and secular level, have been persecuted for it. And I've shown that in my shows this week. I've shown it in my shows going over the last 10 years. And so I use it as an example of really what they're doing in the spiritual realm here. Now, let's talk about, in a yesterday's show, I started bringing together a whole bunch of quotes from people throughout the course of history who knew the truth about the Jesuit order and who they are. And I believe that's quite important, because most people in America have no idea who they are. And isn't that the best way to basically weasel your way into a country? If you are the enemy and and the people around you don't even know who you are, boy, you can get away with a lot of things, including murder and genocide and changing of political views, of creating a world in both the financial, the social, every aspect of your life, medical, in the way they want you to live. And that's exactly what they do. We're going to get back to some of those quotes. We got up to Abraham Lincoln, going back, starting in, let's say, the 15th, starting with Ignatius Loyola when they formed the Jesuit order to defeat the Protestants and basically kill them during the Protestant Reformation. And we've worked our way up to Lincoln. But I want to take an aside here in this half hour, come back to some more quotes by scholars who have dealt with the subject, who are silenced by the mainstream press, who are silenced by most of the alternative media. And the reason is they can't get away with this if it is not a secret agenda. And I've talked about how this agenda started way, before the America was formed. And basically, there was a secret agenda amongst the founding fathers who were taking marching orders from the Vatican, i.e. the Jesuit order, in creating this revolution, in creating this country, in one purpose and one purpose alone. And that was to bring the Vatican into this country and to one day have their way with making it a Catholic country, as well as turning the world into a basically easily controlled world by taking away nationalism, by taking away religious views. And if you have a religious view, a spiritual view, it better coincide with the Pope. No talking against him today or in the future if you want to participate in this new world order that they're creating, which is actually an old world order, as I've said. So, to take an aside here, let me just make this statement. Throughout the course of history, most every generation, there are some people who think they're living in the end times and the world moves on. And in our time, we're looking at many people in the secular world, and we've dealt with this subject, talking about the end is near. The end of America is near, and they point to how Hollywood codes this in movies like Back to the Future, where they have coded in 9/11 prior to 9/11 when the movie was done in the 80s, and then they also coded a date of 10/4/2016, and people are calling for a huge, people in the secular world are saying something big is going to happen. There are wars in the offing. This world is going to be turned into a powder keg, both from natural events and also orchestrated wars. So we're looking at this right now from the secular point of view, and we're looking at a period of time here that appears to be very, very short, correct? Well, what does prophecy say about that? And you hear so many different things. But I wanted to bring up a subject here that's interesting, the Jesuit Pope. The first Jesuit Pope, and many say it will be the last Pope. Now it's interesting that there are people who I know are co-intel, that are working for them especially, working for the Vatican or whatever, that talk about this. And they're telling us this is the last Pope. And they have created a scenario that this is the infiltrated Antichrist, the first Antichrist that is taking over the good Vatican. And Francis is Satan personified. Okay, so we're hearing it from the co-intel side. Now, what do Bible believers think about this? And there are many different things, theories about prophecy. They refer to the book of Revelations, things like that. And they talk about how we're in the final days. So I thought we'd look at what one group of people at a place called World's Last Chance thinks about this. And they bring into play here the Pope Francis, and listen to what they have to say about this, and tell me what you think afterwards. And I'm going to spend a little time this half hour talking about this. And they say this: the world has been living under the reign of Pope Francis. We all know that, right? The eighth and final king, since he was enthroned as the absolute monarch of the Vatican Kingdom on March 19th, 2013. Now, if we go back to the Middle Ages, the popes, they enjoyed absolute power over all emperors, kings, princes, and nobility of Europe. Now, I might add that they're doing the same thing today, but in kind of a more 2016 way. Everything is done through the secret agenda now has taken on a deceptive role, a very deceptive role. So the people have no idea that these leaders, these world leaders like Putin, like Obama, just to use two as an example. We can throw the Chinese leader in there, the Korean leader. We can throw in Cuba. They're all, in a sense, working at the top levels together to create this one world government now. And behind the scenes, it's the same Vatican Kingdom, the same Jesuit order since the 15th century that has been assigned this project, so to speak. Now, however, in 1798, going back, this is right around the time of the American Revolution, remember? Afterwards, we're looking at 1798. After this country has been formed, the papacy received a deadly wound and entered into its wilderness experience. And they say refer to Book of Revelations 13, 3:17. Okay? Now, recovery from this deadly wound, Rome was stripped of its earthly powers in that sense. Recovering from this deadly wound has been slow, yet steady process. And in 1929, the papacy managed to greatly accelerate her recovery efforts when she, together with the Kingdom of Italy, signed the Lateran Treaty with the help of Mussolini, which essentially created Vatican City as a city-state and essentially made the Pope king of this Vatican city-state again. Although this was a far cry from the despotic power that the Vatican enjoyed in the Middle Ages, the papacy was pleased to accept this agreement, and it was a necessary step in her recovery. So we look at Revelation 17, they say, foretold. Now listen, this is what they say, and you Bible prophecy researchers, chime in on this if you choose. Revelation 17 foretold that there would be 7 kings, followed by an 8th and final king. It is during the reign of this final king, Pope Francis I, that the papacy will fully recover from the deadly wound inflicted by the French civil powers in 1798. Now let's look at this. If they say the final king will be the 8th, we start out with Pope Pius XI from 1922 to 1939 as the first. Then we go to Pope Pius XII, the Hitler's Pope, I call him. Then we go to John XXIII, 1958 to 1963. Pope Paul VI from 63 to 78. John Paul I. Now this was an interesting one. I got to know a lot about this story. He reigned only 33 days. In 1978, and he was killed in the Vatican. I happened to be in Rome after that, a couple of years after that, and learned a lot about really why he was killed, who he was, and it was very, very interesting. Now, John Paul II took over for a long time, 1978 to 2005, and he was the 6th king. Benedict XVI, April 19th, 2003 to February 28th, 2013. He was the 7th king. He resigned, interesting, isn't it, to allow Francis I, the first Jesuit pope, to be the 8th. And they say he's the devil from the bottomless pit, controlled totally by Satan. Even he is the 8th and is of the 7th and goeth into perdition. He is the 8th of the 7. Okay, going into perdition, and Revelation 17:11 said that. So, according to this interpretation of prophecy, we're in the final days, and Pope Francis is the final king, as told in Revelation, in the book of Revelations. No one living today says this group that I'm reading from has at any point witnessed the papacy ruling in the fullness of her beast power. Sadly, most are either ignorant or oblivious to the dark history of the papacy. I've said that millions of times, folks, when she ruled over the kings of the earth as a dreadful beast power. It is estimated that between 50 and 100 million of Christ's followers, of God's followers, were martyred at the hand of the papacy. And yet, this is not talked about in the proper terms, and yet our leaders bow down to this Pope. It is a sign that should be understood by the American people. And we would have such a different world if this story was told. At least if it was given the opportunity to be there so people could make up their own mind, but they cannot have it that way. It's thus the persecution of people like Tony Alamo, thus the changing of history, thus the killing of Abraham Lincoln by the Jesuit order, and so on the story goes. Now, a gentleman by Mr. W.E.H. Lecky, History of the Rise and the Influence of the Spirit of Rationalism in Europe, said this in Volume 2, page 32. That the Church of Rome has shed more innocent blood than any other institution that has ever existed among mankind will be questioned by no Protestant who has a complete knowledge of history. It is, and that quote is amazing. And it's impossible to form a complete idea, folks, of the multitude of her victims. And it is quite certain, he says, that no powers of imagination can adequately realize their sufferings. Now, they come together and they give us 12 facts here. And I've got about 8 minutes to get this done, hopefully, because I got to do a half hour on the other subject I wanted to talk about today. And they say this group that I'm at, let me give you what their name is here. It's World's Last Chance, says there are 12 facts that we must understand about living under the reign of the 8th King, Pope Francis. The first fact, the second coming of Christ is only a few years away, they say. We can proclaim with exceeding joy that the second coming of Christ is but a few years away. And they say the seventh King Benedict relinquished his office at the age of 85, citing his inability to cope, making way for the last pope, who is 76 years old. And he's living with one lung, by the way. And it's reasonable to conclude that he can't carry out successfully his mission for that many more years, can he? Now, fact number 2. Final events will unfold in a rapid succession, given the shortness of time. Between now and the second coming of Christ, the following events will take place: the sounding of the trumpets and the 7 last plagues, the full restoration of the beast power. We do know for certain that worldwide the events will catapult the papacy again into a despotic beast status. We believe this restoration may take place after the first woe. Okay. All world leaders will surrender their power to Francis. The enactment of a worldwide Sunday law included, and we go from there. Number 3, character perfection will have to be achieved during a short period of time. We no longer have the luxury of time, they say, to overcome every weakness and besetting sin. We need to wage a relentless war against every sin, while His grace is still available to us. So they're giving some advice to Christians. Number 4, there will not be any lasting worldwide economic prosperity. The current economic crisis engulfing the world is destined to worsen, they say. Fact 5, the rate of cataclysmic events. Let's go back to that. The rate of cataclysmic events will accelerate. We can expect more earthquakes. There was a 5.2 earthquake today right outside of, I think it was in Borrega Springs, out in the central California, near LA, I guess. Sinkholes, storms, hurricanes, tornadoes, floods, famines, etc. Fact 6, soon to take place, satanic impersonations of the dead, particularly Christ's disciples and Mary, climaxing in Satan impersonating Christ himself. And they say as Francis ascends in power and stature, his worldwide standing will be solidified through the demonic impersonation of Bible characters. This will deceive the world into believing that heaven is backing and blessing Francis's actions. Number 7. So we're moving on here. They give us 12 signs. The Spirit of Christ will be increasingly withdrawn from this world, resulting in the escalation of wickedness, chaos, and turmoil. While there will be calls for peace and tranquility from Francis and the world leaders, there will be increasing turmoil, an incessantly escalating number of wars and rumors of wars. Some of these wars will be nuclear. Do we hear the rumblings of NATO and America provoking Russia into a war? Same with China. We hear sabers rattling in North Korea. We know the turmoil going on in the Middle East. Number 8. And no buying-selling decree will be enacted against the true Sabbath keepers and will be enforced throughout the world. This takes care of the economic situation. At the instigation of this 8th and final king, Pope Francis, the prophesied no buying-selling decree is told in Revelation 13:17 will be enacted against the true Sabbath keepers at the instigation of Francis, the last pope. It will be proclaimed that the world's restored prosperity is dependent on universal homage to Rome's counterfeit Sunday Sabbath. Number 9, regional wars will flare up all over the world, and the UN will be unable to contain the multitudinous conflicts. 10, food and water shortages will sweep the world, causing the death of millions. The devastating impact of the trumpets coupled with the ongoing drought in major basket countries will lead to worldwide food and water shortages. Fact 11, the 8th King Francis will blame Christ's true Sabbath keepers for all the troubles plaguing the world. The world will believe Rome's lies, and Christ's faithful will experience unprecedented hatred and persecution by the suffering masses. Number 12. Towards the end of Pope Francis's reign, Christ will cease his intercessory work in the most holy place in the heavenly sanctuary. The world will not know when Christ ceases his intercessory work on behalf of sinners, but when this dreadful event takes place, it will mean that there will be no more repentance for sin. The final sealing of both the righteous and the wicked will have taken place. We are indeed living in the most solemn time, they say. This is not the time to bury our heads in the sand. If we are serious about accepting Christ's last call of mercy, then we cannot afford to procrastinate our unconditional surrender to His Spirit. We need to take hold of every precious moment given to us to build our characters and be cleansed from every sin and weakness. The cleansing process does not take place overnight. It requires time and a relentless battle against self. His Spirit is ever ready to aid us in the very necessary transformation work. May we arise to the seriousness of the times in which we live. We are closer to eternity than you think, but between now and eternity we have much work to do in ourselves and for others. Okay, so I wanted to, as we talk many times about in the secular world about what's what's going to hit the fan and the end is near for America. I just wanted to look at this from a biblical point of view with their interpretations, and I'm sure there are others. Sure, there's some things you disagree with. If you do, contact me at Greg Beacon, that's GregBeacon @gmail.com. Always look forward to your comments, criticisms, etc., because the only way to get to the bottom of all this is for all of us to start thinking in these terms and talking about them and bringing our experiences to the table so that we can have for once and for all, an intellectual discussion, not leaving out this very important point, Vatican-led New World Order. Back in 3 minutes on the Investigative Journal.
Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
I know you all want answers, and believe me, so do I, and I'll do my best to get them.
Despite Nicolas Cage's promise to do his best to get left behind rapture answers for us, don't hold your breath. Not everyone believes Left Behind is true prophecy. Some may even regard as conspiratorial the mainstream re-release of the Left Behind movie, with actor Nicolas Cage portraying the main character, as an attempt to further reinforce in the minds of all this perception of false prophecy, in order to condition the masses for the play about to begin. If you want true Bible prophecy answers, get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. The author exposes the Latin rapture origin, the 7-year tribulation deception, true Bible revelation of Daniel's 70 weeks, the abomination of desolation, the restrainer, America in the Revelation, the image of the beast and the mark of the beast, and the truth about God's chosen people, and so much more about Bible prophecy. This book will shatter the Left Behind paradigm of future events. Get the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. Visit crosstheborder.org, CROSS, crosstheborder.org, to get your print, EPUB, or PDF version of the book, The Rapture Will Be Canceled. That's crosstheborder.org.
The program you are listening to is 100% sponsored by you, the listener, on this First Amendment Rights Media channel. You will notice that there are few commercials on this radio network. There's a good reason for that. Corporate advertising dollars come with strings that limit program content. So without your help, these programs cannot continue on internet or our several affiliates. If you benefit by the educational law programs, we ask you to give. If you are admonished or nurtured by the Bible and ministry programs, we ask you to give. If some voice a cause that you are passionate about, we ask you to give. If you believe in any of these, we ask you to support them as you would a missionary on a continual basis, as if giving a tithe for missionary radio. These programs are not commercially viable and must be supported by those faithful to the cause of truth. Look for the button to sponsor your favorite programs at our listen and schedule pages on the internet. Then, when you subscribe, we will send you the last quarterly MP3 CD of that program immediately, and continue to do so with each new quarter. We will also give you unlimited archive access to all of our programs. We're asking you to give much less than a tithe, so that you may also send support directly to a particular program host, cause, and anywhere else the Spirit may lead you. Do all to the glory of our God and Creator, for His holy nation, the only kingdom that will last forever. Thank you for listening.
Okay, we're back for the second half hour of the Investigative Journal on this June 10th, 2016 day on our calendar. And I want to get back to some quotes from many people throughout the course of history who told us what the Jesuit order and the Vatican's agenda really was about. And I left off with Abraham Lincoln yesterday, gave a few quotes that he gave us regarding what the Vatican is really all about and the Jesuit order. And we've done so many more shows about him and what he said, how he was killed by them. And you can go back to those and get those shows on my website. Or you'll find them on the internet. People have done YouTubes about them, etc. So what I thought I'd do in this half hour is to finish up some of these quotes. And I'm quoting maybe 40 or 50 people. And this is probably just the tip of the iceberg. I can't imagine how many writings have been destroyed. But one thing I've noticed a pattern, the closer you get to 2016, the fewer people out there are really talking about this. And writing serious books about it. And I believe as time goes on, there won't be any. And it is basically a strategy to the Jesuits basically control our educational system. and they control history, and much of history has been distorted. You're not going to get it anywhere. And instead of starting off with working our way down from Lincoln, let's move forward to Nino Lobello from 1922 to 1997, and look and see just a short little quote on what he said. And he specialized in writing about the Vatican, and he's an author and a journalist, and if you can get some of his work, just Google Nino Lobello. And one little quote here. He said, "The Pope's confessor, an ordinary priest, must be a Jesuit." Now, the Pope is a Jesuit now. He must visit the Vatican once a week at a fixed time, and he alone may absolve the Pope of his sins. Interesting. Now, what about Michael Bunker? American writer, historian, theologian. You don't hear much about him, do you? But listen to what he says. Listen to what he says about what's going on here. He says, quote, "There is a conspiracy against Christendom. But who are Satan's agents in this conspiracy? The agents are the Jesuits. Even though the Jesuits exude vast influence and control in the areas of theology, education, recorded history, and current media, I am still perplexed that virtually no literature exists exposing the Jesuits' influence on mainline Protestantism. In this work, the author uncovers forgotten history regarding the cooperative salvation theology of the Jesuits. From Cain to Charles G. Finney, this book proves that modern Protestantism has abandoned the doctrines of grace and embraced the satanic doctrines of cooperative salvation." Get his stuff. Michael Bunker. One thing he mentioned about, it's always interested me regarding where does this evil come from. And many times we've sat in discussions. I've just sat with rabbis, priests from the Catholic Church, Protestants, Hindus, you name it. I've talked to them. And we all get down to this idea of evil. Where does it come from? Does God allow it? And the question, I think, one nice discussion about it is to really understand the story of Cain and Abel, and read that, and try to analyze things. And you'll see from what God said to Cain, and how this has progressed throughout the course of history. I believe that explains it pretty well. And there are different interpretations of that section of the Bible. But I'll tell you, we've presented a couple, one interpretation that to me needs to be put into the mainstream to talk about it. And I think if you start looking at that book, and I'm not going to get into the detail, I'm going to let you do it, you'll start understanding where evil comes from. And you'll understand that even today, I've always said this a long time ago, the Vatican copies, they know the Bible inside and out. They will copy prophecy. And if you're a Bible-believing Christian or if you're an atheist, you got to understand this. And I've talked to both sides in this case, and I'd like to open it up to, I don't always like to just preach to the choir, but whether you believe in the Bible or not, you got to understand the Vatican takes the Word of God and will copy it, and basically you can find out through their signs, their symbols, they tell you exactly what they're going to do, and that they must do. You figure that one out. All right, go read the book of Cain and Abel again, and try to figure out where this evil comes from. I think that will help you when you start really taking that book apart. All right, another guy, real important. We've talked about him many times. He wrote a book called The Secret History of the Jesuits. Edmund Paris. He was born in 1894, died in 1970. And a couple of his major quotes, he said this: "The public is practically unaware of the overwhelming responsibility carried by the Vatican and its Jesuits in the starting of the two world wars. A situation may be explained in part by the gigantic finances at the disposition of the Vatican and its Jesuits, giving them power in so many spheres, especially since the last conflict. Jesuits are a secret society, a sort of Masonic order, with super added features, kind of the Masons on steroids. I put that one in there, of revolting odiousness and 1,000 times more dangerous. Now, quote, Paris said the Fuhrer had come to power, thanks to the votes of the Catholic Zentrum Center Party, overseen by Jesuit Ludwig Kaas, only 5 years before 1933, but most of the objectives cynically revealed in Mein Kampf were already realized. This book was written by the Jesuit-controlled Father Bernhard Stampfel and signed by Hitler, for it was the Society of Jesus which perfected the famous Pan-German program as laid out in his book, and the Fuhrer endorsed it. So, get that. Read about that. Then we have to bring in F. Tupper Saucy III, 1936 to 2007, American composer, musician, author, and artist. And you can go on the web and people have translated, not translated, but there's YouTubes on my interview with Tupper Saucy. I did two. One I can find, one was destroyed. And you can also get a transcript of that at certain places on the internet. And I spoke with him before he died in 2007 regarding his book, The Rulers of Evil. And he said this: the Roman Inquisition had been administered since 1542 and to date, going on as we speak, by the Jesuits. And I've talked a lot about Tupper Saucy, and go get that book, Rulers of Evil, if you haven't read it. Another person I happen to discuss a lot about is Alberto Rivera. He was an ex-Jesuit, killed by them in 1997. I've spoken with his wife. She's been on my show many times in the past. She actually has a small ministry in Florida, and if you go to some of my old shows, you'll find out that the Jesuits, after his death, came to her and stated that if she would sign a paper saying that he was insane and all the things he said were a lie, she would be provided with money for the rest of her life, starting with $1 million. She refused. They also tried to find out where he was buried, because she had to keep that silent. She wouldn't tell them, because their plans are to dig him up and take his bones into the Vatican. This is kind of a sick way of worshiping their enemies. Control over them forever, correct? She wouldn't tell them where he was buried. But he said this, one little quote, maybe we haven't discussed it before. The higher I went in the Jesuit order, the more corruption I saw within the institution. I was invited to attend a secret black mass by high-ranking Jesuits, including Superior General Pedro Rupe, in a monastery in the northern part of Spain. When I knelt to kiss the ring of the high official, I saw a symbol on that ring that made my blood run cold. It was a Masonic symbol, the compass in the square, a thing I hated, and I had been told to fight against it. I found out the Jesuit general was also a Mason, and a member of the Communist Party in Spain. Just one quote. Get as much as you can about him. Read about it. Interesting. Now, we can't forget 1914 to 1990, a writer and philosopher, Avro Manhattan. He wrote much about the Jesuits. The Jesuits, he said, are one of the largest stockholders in the American Steel Company, Republican National. They are also among the most important owners of the four greatest aircraft manufacturing companies in the U.S., Boeing, Lockheed, Douglas, and Curtiss-Wright. Folks, that doesn't sound like a religious organization to me. He says no political event or circumstance can be evaluated without the knowledge of the Vatican's part in it, and no significant world situation exists in which the Vatican does not play an important explicit or implicit role. Avro discussed much of their financial holdings, and it's an amazing, he looked at it from their financial point, their control point of governments, it seems, things like that. Get a lot try to find much of what he has written about them, because pretty soon these things aren't going to be available. And I encourage people to do research on this. I'm researching now a lot about the American Revolution period and trying to make a case that the Vatican was instrumental, the Jesuits were instrumental in creating the strategy behind the American Revolution for a hidden reason, not what we're told in our history books. Now let's look at what some of the members of the Nazi Party said, using their words. People like to do that, don't they? Use the words of your enemy, so to speak, and let them tell you the truth. They're doing that now right out in the political arena in America. Hillary Clinton is using the words of Donald Trump to try to destroy him. Donald Trump's using the words of Clinton to try to destroy her. And the game goes on. The theater of American politics is quite interesting this year. And by no means do I want you to think it's the real world. They are theatrical performers playing a part for a hidden agenda. It's the thesis, antithesis, to create a synthesis, the Hegelian dialectic at work in the political arena. But Walter Friedrich Schellenberg, 1910 to 1952, he was a German SS brigade Führer who rose through the ranks of the SS to become the head of foreign intelligence. Now here's what he said. The SS had been organized by Himmler according to the principles of the Jesuit order. The rules of service and spiritual exercises prescribed by Ignatius Loyola constituted a model which Himmler strove carefully to copy. Absolute obedience was the supreme rule. Every order had to be executed without comment. Now, you've seen so much in your lifetime about, you've heard so much about the Nazi Party. You'll listen to our leaders even today talk about the evil Hitler, but they don't bring up this, do they? They don't bring in the Vatican connection to this, do they? And if they did, that would mean the Vatican was their enemy. So why are we so, why are they so friendly with them today? You think they've changed in a short period of time since World War II? No, they want to keep it a secret because they're actually preparing World War III. Okay, let's go to the main guy here. We've talked about many of Hitler's quotes. We've talked about his mentor being Pope Pius XII. And Adolf Hitler was born in 1889. They say he died in 1945, but many say he never was killed in that bunker, and he lived happily to an old age somewhere in Argentina in South America. Okay, or somewhere else outside of Germany. And I have a tendency to agree that much of that, his death was staged, and we protected him. Because basically all of them work on the same level. At the top, they're all working together. Now, he was Austrian-born, German politician, and the leader of a Nazi party. Now, here's what he said. I have learned most of all from the Jesuit order. So far, there has been nothing more imposing on earth than the hierarchical organization of the Catholic Church. A good part of that organization I've transported direct to my own party. The Catholic Church must be held up as an example. I will tell you a secret. I am founding an order. In Himmler, I see our Ignatius de Loyola. Oh boy, he knows a lot about it, doesn't he? So you see the connections. You see how they we're never told the truth. And we're never going to be told the truth by our leaders about how they're preparing us for the big war, another big war. Now, here's one. This guy I haven't heard of, but I find it quite interesting. So let's how much time do we have here before we get into the weekend? Let's see. I have about 8 minutes, so that's enough time to get this quote in. Edmund Romain, 1832 to 1911, former Freemason who served as both secretary and master of the Keystone Lodge. Okay, what did he say? The religion of Masonry is a system of absolute despotism, and like that of Rome, demands a blind, unquestioning obedience to all its laws, rules, and edicts, whether right or wrong. What a singular commentary on the indifference, the subserviency, or the cowardice of society, that an institution professedly organized by such cunning knaves, the Jesuits, and for such base purposes, of which has been sustained by fraud, falsehood, and deception from the commencement of its career to the present time, should be permitted today to dictate to, if not virtually, to rule the nation, and to create such a dread in communities that even some of the ministers of Christian denominations who detest the vile philosophy and who would like to see it swept from the face of the earth are absolutely afraid to even mention its name, either in the pulpit, the prayer meeting, or the Sabbath school, lest its secret vendetta vengeance might in some concealed manner be wreaked upon them. It's exactly what's going on today. And there's certain people out there like Tony Alamo and several others. I mentioned the little ministry that was targeted by the Jesuits, who you never hear about, and it was run by one of the relatives, I think it was a great-great-great-granddaughter of Samuel Morse, the inventor of the Morse code, who went to Rome to tell us about this threat, and others. That's an interesting quote. Now, let's look at what Father Jeremiah J. Crowley, he was an ex-Catholic priest. He was born in 1861 and lived to 1927, they say. He says, although the Middle Ages and the Renaissance period, the popes kept Italy in turmoil and bloodshed for their own family and territorial advantages, and they kept all of Europe in turmoil for 2 centuries after the Reformation, in fact, just as long as they could in the wars of religion, their whole policy is based on stirring up hatred and promoting conflicts from which they hope to draw worldly advantage. Now, isn't that interesting, folks? They're doing the same thing today. Just look around you. Popes and their Jesuitical agents have been and are the instigators of wars. And while the world is having real pain, Rome is having champagne. Good quote. The Jesuit Superior General is at the head of this black and mute militia, which thinks, wills, acts, obeys, as the passive instrument of his designs. Their whole life must have been but one aim, the advancement of the Jesuit order to which they are attached. How long shall the Roman Catholic hierarchy play the people for fools? Mister, they are playing us for fools today. So it's still going on, even almost 100 years after you passed away. Shall the government be of the people, for the people, and by the people, or just by the Pope? Let's not let the Pope of Rome name our president for us. Lovers of our country, beware of Jesuitical intrigues, the political power of Romanism, and the honeyed words of politicians reaching after the presidency. It's perfect today, folks. That's what they're doing with the candidates today. That is why, they have the old Al Smith dinner, right? And this is right before the presidential election, when the nominee of the Republican Party, which this year will be Trump, and they'll have the Al Smith dinner again, and then Obama will be they'll both be seated at the table in between the Cardinal of New York. They'll be on one side, the other will be on the other. And this is just a symbol of who really controls who they are. The Al Smith dinner. Read about that. Now here's one. Let's see how much time, so I don't run out. Okay, I got about 3 minutes, so I can get in 1 or 2 more. Hector McPherson, born in 1851, died in 1924. He was a prolific Scottish writer and journalist. So hurtful was the Jesuit order found to be up to 1860, it was expelled no fewer than 70 times from countries which had suffered from its machinations. In spite of continental riot warnings, England under Queen Victoria, 1837 to 1901, who opened up communication with the Vatican in 1877 and enabled the order to carry out its Second Irish Massacre, 1845 to 1850, has become a Jesuit dumping ground. Those whom other countries have found from sad experience to be enemies, Britain allows to land on her shores and to carry on unmolested their work of iniquity. We are carrying toleration to excess, and unless there's a change of policy, this nation will one day pay a heavy penalty. And you might as well just say that about America. Hector McPherson said that. What did Francis Parkman say? He was an American historian from 1823 to 1893. Now, were all these people conspiracy theorists? You people out there that say that? Like Bill O'Reilly, like Alex Jones used to, well, he does still say it, like he used to say to me, 10 years ago. And all these people, were these people conspiracy theorists as well? He said this: the Jesuits, then as now, were the most forcible exponents of ultramontane principles. The Church to rule the world, the Pope to rule the Church, the Jesuits to rule the Pope. Such was and is the simple program of the Order of Jesus, and to it they have held fast, except on a few rare occasions of misunderstanding. And that was a pretty good quote. I want to make sure I can get one more in. Well, we got about a minute. I might not be able to. Let's see how long this is. Too long. I wanted to read what G.B. Nicolini said. He was an Italian ex-Catholic. He published the finest Italian history of the Jesuits in existence. So go get that yourself. I don't have time today. G.B. Nicolini, he said, take the Jesuit for what he ought or appears to be, and you commit the greatest of blunders. Draw the character after what the Jesuit seems to be in London, you will not recognize your portrait in the Jesuit of Rome. The Jesuit is the man of circumstances, despotic in Spain, constitutional in England, and I might say constitutional in America, republican in Paraguay, bigot in Rome, idolater in India. He shall assume and act out his own person with admirable flexibility, all those different features by which men are usually to be distinguished from each other. Okay. We'll leave it there. I wish I could read more. We'll get back. I only got about 10 seconds. Have a good weekend. We'll see you Monday. I'll continue with this on Monday, and see you then on the Investigative Journal.
Since the beginning of time, kings have sought it, nations have fought for it. It has been traded, it has been borrowed, it has been purchased, it has been stolen. There's a reason for it. To secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and to our posterity. Invest with the security of gold and silver. Call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188 or visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. Listen to Financial Survival with your host Melody Cedarstrom right here on FirstAmendmentRadio.com at 4 p.m. Eastern or 1 p.m. Pacific Time. Visit discountgoldandsilvertrading.net. or call Discount Gold and Silver Trading at 1-800-375-4188. Toll free, 1-800-375-4188.